The church has celebrated the Epiphany as the 12th day of Christmas for a very long time. But it's not at all likely that the wise men appeared in Bethlehem 12 days after the birth of Jesus. In fact, it could have been as many as several months, maybe even up to 2 years. We don't know for sure. But I've never seen a creche without the wise men there also, as if everybody showed up at one time. But that's not likely the case. Now, one of the Christmas carols that we're not singing today, which is probably a good thing, is We Three Kings. We Three Kings was written by an Episcopal priest whose name was John Henry Hopkins. He was a professor at the General Theological Seminary in New York City, which is the very seminary that I attended. And while there, I also learned about Clement Clark Moore, who wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." He was also a priest. He was a professor at the General Theological Seminary. We have a number of things in our own church history that have become a part of the wider understanding of the use of carols and singing and celebrating at Christmas time. But how does it happen that we have three kings? We have allusions to that in our readings today. The reading from Isaiah said that a multitude of camels will cover you, and young camels of Midian and Ephah. All the thrones of Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. Now there we have two hints, gold and frankincense. And then in the psalm, we hear that there will be kings from Tarshish, kings from Arabia and Saba. They will offer gifts. And then in the gospel story, Matthew tells us that these were wise men. Now the term king probably comes from that part of the psalm, according to what John Hopkins wrote. So in due time, we got to the understanding that there were three wise men, and that's partly connected with the fact that there were three gifts. Now, none of this we can actually substantiate as reality, that only three showed up, but it gives us a way of looking at the story. We three kings of Orient are, goes the carol. And they offered gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Myrrh is not mentioned in the other readings, but it comes out in the gospel reading. Now, in the 1940 hymnal, the names are given to the three wise men. I don't know if you ever noticed that before, but one was called Gaspard, sometimes translated Casper or Jasper, and then Melchior and Balthazar. And they each had verses assigned to them in the 1940 hymnal. This newer hymnal has done away with that. But where did those names come from? We don't know for sure, but some people think that they actually came into being through the English historian Bede. Could be that he came up with them or he heard them. And that's back in the 7th century. Now, there are also other names from other parts of the world that have been given to these wise men that Matthew calls wise men, not kings, but wise men, who came from the east, probably from Persia. They were probably Zoroastrians who worshiped fire. Once in a while in the Episcopal Church, we hear people say, We're slightly Zoroastrian because we can't worship without fire. So somewhere in that middle part of the Middle East is where these wise men came from. They were not only astrologers, but they probably were astronomers as well, and they studied the stars. And they came across this constellation or conjunction of a star that became known of as the Bethlehem star. Did you see that conjunction recently in the southeast? I thought it was going to be bigger, but I did see it. And there are astronomers rather, who think that that could have been the kind of star that led the wise men to find the baby Jesus. We don't know for sure about that either. Anyway, what it amounts to in Epiphany, the celebration of Epiphany, which we're doing 3 days early this year here at St. Luke's, is that this is what we call the manifestation of Jesus to the world. Up until this point, everybody who had seen him or had any association with him probably would have been a Jew. But here, the child is being observed by people from a foreign country, a foreign religion, a foreign way of life, and they appear. Sometimes I call the Epiphany God's show and tell. God is showing and telling to the world who Jesus is. They are symbolized by the wise men. And there are interesting legends about them. Some say that in due time, after they went back home, Thomas, the apostle, who we have reason to believe went to India, found them, baptized them, ordained them, and they became ministers of the gospel. I don't know how true that is, but they say that some of their relics are in the cathedral at Cologne in France, with a few of them having been taken to Milan. So their bones are kind of all over the place, it appears. However, whether any of that is true or not doesn't really matter, because what it amounts to is that God is proclaiming to the whole world through the visit of these wise men that what the Christ child has to offer is salvation for everyone. That's really the point of Epiphany, that Christ has come for the whole world. So that's what we celebrate on Epiphany, with the appearance of the wise men coming to the Christ child and bringing extraordinary gifts that don't sound like any baby shower I've ever been to. I'm sure any mother would not turn down some gold, but frankincense, myrrh, we have symbolic reasons for why those are presented. But more than their gifts, what it amounts to is that they are seeing the gift that God has given to the whole world in the birth of Jesus.